Hello, everyone. My name is Blanca Bukovo. I'd like to welcome you guys to the annual retirement, life in retirement panel. And we are here I just want to welcome everybody. I'm the healthcare facilitator for the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. I'm here to support both employees, their dependents, as well as retirees and their dependents as well. Um, so I hope you guys are up and ready and have your drinks, you have your coffee, you have your lunch ready to go so you can enjoy the next hour of discussions regarding how is it to be retired and what are some tips we can take away from today. So I'll just switch it over to Camille, who's from the UC Retirement Center, UC Berkeley's Retirement Center. So
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Camille Coué. I'm Associate Director of the Berkeley Retirement Center. Um, we actually support retirees from three departments. So from UC Berkeley, also from Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and then also from OP. So we serve all three constituencies of retirees. And this is one of my favorite events of the year that we do because we find that in preparing for retirement, a lot of people focus on the nuts and bolts, the paperwork, the financials, but they can often forget about the emotional and social part of the transition. And so this is a great event to kind of get you thinking about what that might be like from a panel of people who have experienced it recently. And so the Retirement Center, one of our main goals is to help retirees maintain connection to campus. We do that through a number of different avenues. We have lifelong learning events, but we also provide the administrative support to the retiree associations. And there are 4 retiree associations that we support. And one of them is the Lab Retiree Association, which Howard is currently the president of. And I know that they're always looking for new board members and people who want to be active in the XLs. The XLs is what the Lab Retiree Association is called. And so we work very closely with Howard and the association to support lab retirees and staying connected to the lab, staying connected to campus, and staying connected to each other. So that's my little spiel. So I'll turn it back over to Blanca.
yeah, I just want to remind everybody before we begin, just to please stay muted unless you're speaking. Please use the chat for questions. We are going to have at least 15, we're going to try to keep 15 minutes available at the end to have a quick Q&A with our panelists. Please don't hesitate to add your questions in the chat though throughout the whole presentation. And we try to get through all of them during the Q&A. But I'll go ahead and, oh, I should say that Camille and I are going to we have already pre-selected questions that have been very popular in the past. So we're going to be asking the questions throughout the event. And I'll go ahead and send it over to Camille for introductions of our wonderful panelists.
Yeah, so I'm super excited to welcome our 4 panelists today. I'm going to spotlight them as I do this. So I'm very excited to welcome Delia Clark to the panel. I'm going to spotlight you, Delia. So Delia worked for 37 years in the UC system, 27 at the lab and 10 with Berkeley, and retired in 2018. Mm-hmm. And then we have Jane Tanamachi. And Jane worked for 21 years at the lab and retired in 2020. And then we also have Rick Diamond, who worked for 40 years at the lab, retiring in 2017. And Howard Hatayama. Again, Howard is the president of the Lab Retiree Association. He worked at the lab for 6 years, retiring in 2015. So big virtual round of applause for our panelists. We're super excited to get started today, and I'll pass it over to Blanca for our first question. Oh, Blanca, you're muted.
Thank you. I was following my rules. Thank you. I would like to ask this question first to Delia. Did you retire with a plan, or did you just go you just went with the flow? You just made it up as you were going?
No, I had a plan. I the first thing I did when I got in my mind to retire was I got one of those countdown apps on my phone. And so it was like, I think it was like 3 years before I retired. So it had all those days, and it's like, oh, thousands of days. And it's like, it's going to take me forever. I think maybe it was 5 years actually. Because it seemed like too long. So I did the countdown, and I used to post it on my Facebook page, and so that people would know that I was serious. And I always talked about my plans after retirement, was living near my son, by my my final destination home, and wanting to build that near my family. So that was always my goal that I kept in front of
Wonderful.
me.
That sounds like a great plan. You should forward that app to me and I'll spread the word and to start planning. I'm wondering if Rick, did you also have a plan or was it different?
Uh, no, unlike Delia, I didn't have a plan. I probably couldn't even download a countdown app on my phone. Um, and I retired sooner than I had thought I would. My parents, my mom and stepdad taught in the UC system till their late 80s. And one of the reasons why I retired was that they were in their late 80s and they needed a lot of help. And while everyone has the situation of, taking care of parents. The parents said they didn't need help, but I would get a call, your mom's fallen, can you come in and help? Or can you meet us at the hospital? So that was really what triggered my looking into retirement. And I didn't follow the optimal path of retiring, in June. It was just triggered by family concerns, teenagers at home and elderly parents.
Ah, so you were one of the sandwich, what they call the sandwich generation, having to take care of two different generations at the same
Yeah, I think it's
time.
sort of a misnomer because everyone's a sandwich generation. I mean,
At one
we
point, yeah.
not everyone has kids, but everyone has responsibilities, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things that um, trigger my looking into retirement.
Mm, thank you for
I think
sharing
when I
that.
told my boss, she just said, "Well, why don't you go to reduced time?" And so I tried that, and I discovered very quickly that I was not going to reduce time, I was going to reduce pay because I was still doing all the work, but I had less salary. So that's one of the calculations you want to make. I know people can manage that better, but that was my experience.
That's interesting. Mm, I thought of doing that myself because it's a good thing to calculate, whether or not it's worth it. I do have a new question, and I'll ask Howard about this. What were your social networks like outside of work when you retired? Did you already have a non-work community, or did you have to build a whole new?
Well, actually, I discovered after retirement that that was an area that I really needed to work on,
Mm,
because work consumed so much of my time that, um, frankly, my social calendar outside of work was, my wife managed all of it, and I really didn't appreciate how much time and effort it took to establish and maintain, new social networks. And it's, I did have some around our health club, and I was involved in, I joined the book club, sort of five, maybe 3 or 4 years before I retired. And those were sort of my main social networks outside of work. And certainly the book club was very stimulating and very helpful in terms of, interacting. And it's a men's book club, and we're all sort of in the same age group. So that was it's a great group. I really enjoyed it, and I'm still with it. Um, and the health club just afforded me a lot of both. I like to swim a lot, so there was a master swim club there that I really enjoyed. Um,
mhm,
but once I
mhm.
retired, I realized that I needed to branch out, and I'm not seeing people every day. like I used to.
Mhm.
And I need to be able to either create situations or reach out and try to establish those opportunities for interacting with people more frequently.
Mhm. So
Um,
it's more of a, you have to put yourself out there a lot more in
Yeah.
order to create the.
yeah, right,
Mhm.
exactly. And I was in a position where I was managing a lot of folks. I was interacting with people all day. And
Mhm.
although those were, I mean, that's a very different kind of relationship. It's still interacting with people. And that was, I realized that was a very positive thing in my work life.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, yeah, it's taking more effort and I'm learning as we go.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I'll ask the same question for Jane.
Oh.
Did you have already your out of work social network, or did you have to create one?
Yeah, well, actually, yes, I did have a pretty active outside. I was already volunteering for a nonprofit organization. I was on the board and I was active at church. And, I have a lot of friends outside. Truthfully, a lot of my friends had retired. So they're like, when are you going to retire so we can go out to lunch? So, yeah, I did have a pretty active outside life. But I think I'm the only one who retired during the pandemic. So it was very unique. In fact, when Camille asked me if I wanted to join this panel, I said, well, my life is not typical. But because what had happened in January of 2020, I decided to retire, had all my plans in place. I was going to all these retirement seminars, so I knew what I had to do. And then what happens in March, we're all sent home. And so I I retired, but it was kind of nice in a way because I kind of ramped down because I knew from working full time, which was, a big job for those of you who know what I used to do. So what I did was I was working from home and working, but as it's not quite as active as when you're in the office. So I just ramped
Mhm.
down. And the one thing I would say about social is that Zoom was kind of a boom for me because I was one of the few people in my social network who knew how to use Zoom. So, they all thought it was great. I would give lessons on how to use Zoom and whatever. So, yeah, that's how I did it. And I don't recommend that, you retire during a pandemic, but it worked out for me.
Mhm. Oh, that's great to know. It's really good to know about that. Thank you so much for answering this question. Appreciate it. Trying to think of ramping up my community outside of work as well. Mhm.
And then so I have some questions about relationships and kind of maybe how those have changed in retirement. So I know, for example, Rick, you mentioned a few things about relationships. Well, first of all, you mentioned how your wife is still working, and there's some, negotiating and changes that come with having one person retired while one person's working. And I'd love for you to speak on that a little bit. And then also, I know that you have kind of like an extensive, it sounds like, social network. Since you're from this area, you have a lot of friends going back to middle school too, and maybe how those relationships have changed in retirement as well.
Thanks. Since my wife's not on the call, I can say a couple of things, but she is on another call upstairs. One of the things in retirement is that we have to make sure our Zoom calls are in different parts, so she's directly above. But yeah, as you said, my wife is still working, and so if she comes home and I'm just reading on the couch, slacker mode doesn't always look, is my dinner ready? It's you have to negotiate. I think Delia, you mentioned also your husband's still working, was that right?
Yes.
So, and it didn't sound like he wanted to retire, but now my wife is saying because she sees me going out and having lunch with friends, she thinks that she'll retire. So, like everything, it's negotiated and it changes. I know it's hard to plan or think what that will look like, but It's something you just discuss. I do complain to her that the downside of retirement is that while she gets vacation, I don't. And I don't get a very sympathetic response. So I just will point out downside of retirement: no overtime, no bonuses, no special awards because you're not in that environment.
But Rick, every
Mm.
day is Saturday.
No, I'm confused. I think it's Tuesday when it's Wednesday. You do lose track of time. Maybe we shouldn't talk about that in this type of seminar. People will, yeah, here's my advice: don't retire. You'll lose track of the days of the week.
Delia, so what has your experience been with a spouse who's also working?
He he jibes me a lot because he says, "Well, I guess I better go to bed because I have to get up and go to work, or I don't get to stay up all night long and do whatever I want to do." But I think it's motivating him to set his own goals and to create his plan, and now he has a target date that he's, going to retire. Um, I think I made it look too good for him. I don't know if we can be together all day, every day in the same house, but we'll see how it works. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
well, yeah, on that note, Howard, I'm kind of curious because I think you said that you and your wife retired at the same time, right? So you two were kind of together in the house
Uh,
at the same time.
it-
How was
and we still are. That's the good news. Um, yes, and we decided to pull the plug at the same time, and I think in retrospect, that was probably the best decision we've made about our retirement, to do it at the same time, because obviously all of the nuts and bolts planning that you mentioned earlier, Camille, you can sort of do that together and have that all kind of in place. Um, but the real benefit is that you know we learned how to sort of negotiate, as Rick was saying, together, and we learned how to plan together better, and it certainly does make planning a lot easier, since we're not distracted, by work, and we're not necessarily, our schedules are a lot more flexible. Um, and I think that, as I said, I think one of our best decisions was to retire at the same time, and fortunately we were able to do that.
Yeah. And then I'm just curious also about, non-partner relationships. If anyone, feel free to chime in. But like I said, I know, Rick, you have kind of like a broad spectrum of friendships and relationships in the Bay Area. And I'm curious if you feel like you've had more time to nurture those relationships, or less time maybe in retirement to focus on those.
Sure. I think one thing lots of retired people say is their days are so full, they can't imagine how they did anything when they had to work. So I did grow up in Berkeley. I run into elementary school friends all the time, have Berkeley High friends that meet for lunch, and pretty regularly meet with former lab colleagues for walks and lunches. It just seems like that people are all there. I think, Howard, you mentioned you have to make the effort to call people up or get together. And I I really enjoy being able to see folks during the week. It's quite social. I also joined a couple choruses. So Berkeley, Bay Area has lots of musical groups, and that's been a great way just to meet new people and share activities.
Yeah.
can I speak to that a little?
Yes, absolutely.
So one of the things that at at work, we used to color every Friday. That was our stress relief for, dealing with the workday life. And so we created this coloring group. We opened it to everyone, and anyone who wanted to come would come. So I still connect with some of my buds, and we do it via Zoom. And one of them's on here now. And we just, we set a date and we meet every month, and we color and craft, and we check up on each other and, support each other that kind of way. But like we were saying earlier, it has to be intentional. Um, and you have to kind of make plans for it because you're not gonna walk in, accidentally see people that you would normally see. You have to make sure that you're creating opportunities to interact with others.
Mhm.
And
And
I
some of
was
them are
gonna,
still working.
yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Julia. In fact, there might be some people that I also Zoom with who I used to work with. I think some of them might be on here. But yeah, it's really nice. And I found that because I worked with a lot of postdocs and whatever, and they've left, some of them are in Canada, some of them are in Europe, and we can still Zoom. And it's really nice because you don't have to be in one location anymore. So it's really nice to keep in
Mhm.
contact with, former colleagues.
Yeah. And so now I'm curious to hear some of your experiences unretiring, or where you put your energy, either in returning to work, which I know some of you have done, and also how much energy you put into volunteering. So Delia, I want to start with you because you had a very interesting take on this. And my understanding is that you actually volunteered more before you retired. And then when you retired, you decided to cut back on that. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and the choices you made?
Sure. So like I left in 2018, and when the pandemic hit, everything kind of shifted. So the plans that I had in place, didn't happen. But and my dad passed away during the pandemic, and I kind of went through this, I don't know, I became like a rebellious teenager, and that I didn't want anybody telling me what to do, or I didn't want anybody telling me I had to be somewhere and be accountable to anyone for anything, which is what retirement really is. And so I didn't have that at work anymore. So the only place I still had it was in some of my volunteer areas, and so I cut down. I removed myself from a leadership post, but I'm still supporting in the background. But it's just the things that I like to do, and not the people side. Like I like to supervise, but I like to supervise and manage people for a few years, and then I can do it without it for another 5 years, and then I can go back to it. So now I know that I don't want to supervise anyone. I don't want to be responsible for anyone anymore. So I'm just going to contribute the way that kind of meets my self-interest, and hopefully it meets their self-interest also, because they can say no, and so can I.
Yes. Being able to say no, I think that's a fun thing about retirement. And then Rick, you kind of you've it sounds like tried out a lot of different volunteer activities to see what you liked better than others. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. Although I thought of something else, and
Yeah.
like you learn from politics, you don't answer the question you're asked, you answer the question you want.
Yeah.
Two things. So Howard mentioned before, swimming, exercise. It sounds like you've got a routine. I don't like routine. I don't like swimming, but exercise does always sound important. And one thing I learned was that some of our health plans actually cover gym membership. Not that I would join a gym, but I did for a short time on retirement and learned that I don't even remember whether it was Kaiser or which, but if you do retire, a lot of gym memberships are covered. So that sounds like a good idea. And instead of going to gyms, I tend to bike places, often the library or donut stores. It's all sort of counterproductive. Your question was volunteering. And like Delia, I didn't look into volunteering or continuing volunteering when I left. It really was an empty time. And the advice I'd been given by people who had retired was don't take things on immediately. You need to decompress. You want to set priorities, and you don't even know what they are. So it was only in the last couple of years that I started looking into volunteer opportunities. And I've found some have been incredibly rewarding. Others feel a little make workish, and you're standing around doing stuff that the staff is supposed to be doing, but maybe you're there. It's okay. So I'm still exploring the world of volunteer. And one last thing, I will put in a plug. Community Resources for Science loves bringing people into classrooms, K through 12. You can do early classrooms, just reading stories to kids, or you can talk about any area of science. They work with you, they set up the teacher meetings. So CRS, Berkeley, check it out. I'm starting a unit on heat and light this semester with fourth graders in North Oakland. But they do all the legwork, they do the training, and you get to go in and just have a good time in the classroom.
And Rick, I also wanted to ask you, because I know that it sounds like more than once, I think you did recall appointments back at the lab. So what was that experience like going back to work after retirement?
Ooh, I could get in trouble here. I'm not a big fan of rehired retirees. When I was at the lab in management, I would see people come back and talk about their win-win situation. They were cheaper, they had their expertise, and I often saw it blocking younger people and access to funders. So it's different in every case, I'll acknowledge, but I think it's something you want to think about seriously. If you come back, are you truly mentoring, or are you, let's say, blocking junior staff from moving forward? And then I can justify my coming back because I came back into a different division doing stuff I had to be retrained, and I don't think at the time my condition in coming back was that I was training my replacement. And so that was a good experience. But in general, well, each case will be individualistic. I don't want to say don't do it, but I think being mindful of when you do come back, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's good advice. And one thing I really wanted to have you all talk on as well, because we hear this a lot from retirees who say, I went into retirement with a plan of what it was going to look like, right? An idea of what it was going to look like. I was going to do all this traveling or something like that. And for different reasons, things don't pan out that way, either because there's a COVID pandemic or there's health issues, either, with health issues with yourself or other people. Caregiving duties often will get in the way of what people had planned. So I just wanted to ask you all, what were your experiences with things not exactly going to plan? And Delia, I'll just start with you, because I know you did have a plan of buying some property, and it didn't work out exactly like you thought it would.
Yeah, my plan was to buy property closer to my son and my dad. We were going to sell his property so that we could all be together and I could take care of him. But he didn't want to go. And so I couldn't go. I couldn't leave him here in Oakland and be, an hour away from him. And so I had to put my plan on hold, and then the pandemic came. And so then he passed away. So, but we had to deal with all of that. So it's kind of you have to kind of have a plan, but also be able to shift and pivot based on what is thrown at you. I mean, no one could predict a pandemic and everything that transpired from that, but it's just being able to adjust and knowing that you're giving yourself time to sit in this space, but then something else will happen and you're going to give yourself time to sit in that space. And then so you have to just be constantly adjusting, and it's not a big, it may be a big thing that you're dealing with, but it's every day is a step towards something. As long as you have a goal of whatever it is you're trying to reach, then if you're moving towards it, then you're still making progress. And I didn't feel bad. Well, I did feel bad about not getting to my property. But I mean, just this last weekend, we started looking for property. So it's, it was the 7-year delay, but it's still happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Howard, do you have any experience with things not going to plan exactly?
Well, I guess on the upside, I didn't have a plan going out. I mean, I had general sort of, yeah, I'm going to do some traveling, you know, both our kids live out of state, so we'll be visiting them a lot. Before I retired, we bought a place here in West Marin, where I'm at now, and that actually has been a good. It's been, you know, sort of uh, very sort of restful to be out here, although there's a lot of work to keep the garden and such. So I had some general things going on. But I think the biggest plan for us, or more specifically, was to kind of, you know, we used to live in the Oakland Hills, and we wanted to get out of the hills. We saw the fire risk, we saw and what drove the other thing that drove us to that decision was, you know, my wife sort of fell and sprained her ankle, same ankle, on the same step twice.
Mm.
And we said, well, you know, that probably is a signal to us. So that got us to move, which I think was a very good thing, because we went from a house to a 2-bedroom condo, still in Oakland. And it was healthy to kind of go through all the stuff and get rid of stuff, and took a lot of work to get rid of, you know, like furniture and whatever, but we're glad we did it. And in a way, it was a good sort of part of a transition to retirement. It was a physical change to our life that kind of reinforced, you know, a different kind of life, a different lifestyle.
Mm.
And you know, so in that way, you know, the plans were general. We got some very specific things accomplished. And we're still kind of have these general sort of things we want to do. And you know, we're going back to Africa this year, Camille,
Wow, nice.
because we liked it so much. So you know, yeah, that's kind of where we are. And I think the most really the thing to keep in mind is, you know, our health is really, at times it feels very stable. It feels like we can do everything. At other times it feels quite tenuous, and maybe not your own necessarily, but your partners or people, you know, in your immediate family. And you can't really predict it, but you kind of have to have enough bandwidth to deal with it when it comes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, so it's just a reality of, you know, being the age we are. And so you know, I just want to sort of share that as something to make part of your plan, but you know, that kind of needs to be there just because.
Yeah.
Mhm. Quite interesting. Here goes a question. Thank you so much, Howard, for answering that question. I'm wondering, what aspects of retirement really surprised you the most? And go ahead and ask Jane this question. What really surprised
What
you?
really surprised me? Well, I wanted to actually backtrack to the question that Camille addressed earlier, if I may. So you know how you said the things you had planned, okay, and then life happens. So actually, beginning of 2020, I had 3 trips planned for when I was going to
Yeah.
retire. So I was going on a cruise, booked. I was going to Japan, booked. I was going to Spain, booked. And then, of course, pandemic hit. So all those were canceled. And then what happened? So that's vacation. Second thing is health. So I don't know. I'm talking to some scientists, but I got the first COVID vaccine. 2 weeks later, I ended up in the hospital and I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. So my health really got compromised. Now, all the doctors said it wasn't A equals B. And so I have been vaccinated all the rest of the time, but it really impacted my health. So number 2. And then number 3 is my husband fell broke his hip. And then from there, he was hospitalized and actually passed away. So, you know, 3 life experiences, and they all happened to me in addition to COVID. But, you know, the one good thing is retirement, you don't have any obligations to get to the office or call and say, I'm not going to be there. So, you know, if you're like agile enough and you kind of say, okay, life happens, but because you have the freedom, and thank you, UCB, because we get a pension. So I didn't really have to worry about things. So yeah, so I really have been banged with all these things, and I'm happy I retired. And like I said, I'm really lucky because I really had a robust social network anyway. So I was able to kind of get through all that. Yeah. So, and I'm sorry, Bianca, I never answered your second question. What surprised me about retirement? All of
I
the,
think
all those, yeah,
all of the above.
all of the above.
You did answer the question. Thank you. Rick, do you have any surprises from retiring?
Not really. I think just how busy I was in retirement. People always ask, what are you doing? But time seems busy. I want to go back to Howard's comment. I think, Delia, we had talked about this before, which is dealing with stuff and jettisoning stuff, whether it's work stuff or things that you just accumulate. I think we had in our previous chat a conversation about dealing with our parents and clearing out their houses and thinking we didn't want to voice this on kids or anyone else. But it's challenging. I mean, I had no trouble taking cartons of paper and getting that all recycled from lab reports, although I did get asked for one study after I had gotten rid of all the original data. I know we're supposed to archive things. But getting rid of stuff seems good. I've been trying to do that. And then I find, again, my wife wants to keep things because she says when she retires, she'll go through the papers and write something. So uh, it's it's challenging dealing with stuff. And let me think, there was another, you asked about surprises. No, I don't think surprises. I mean, I didn't have a plan, so there was nothing that went by plan. And yes, things change all the time, and you accommodate, you pivot, you change, you pursue new things. I know what it was, travel. Um, Piece of trivia, we did a study many years ago of energy use by different age groups. And this was a study done in the UK and England. And it turns out that one of the fastest growing energy consuming behaviors were the elderly traveling after retirement. And it was interesting because before people would retire and they would stay in their village or in their town and they would work in churches or volunteer neighborhood stuff. But after some TV shows that showed retirement, Brits going off to Greece or anywhere else in the world, it became the social expectation that when you retire, you're supposed to do educated travel or travel for various purposes. And really, the carbon footprint is large and it's sort of interesting. So I've been encouraging friends to travel to Hayward. There's a new library in Japanese Gardens. It's a fabulous place. You can get there on BART. Or, my wife and I will take a vacation in San Francisco and explore things there. So, of course, if your dream is to go to Antarctica or Japan for family reasons, or Africa because you love wildlife, by all means. But don't neglect to look at things that are really, I mean, my brother and I bike through Oakland all the time and discover great places to eat, places to visit. It's just there's a lot you can do locally, and I think that's important to think about.
I can appreciate that. Really, really. Stay close to home. I have a
Well, get
question,
out of your familiar stuff, but see
but still do
see
something
something.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Celia, looking back at how the process of retirement or what you did during the retirement process, would you have done anything differently? Would you have retired sooner? Would you had anything that you could think of that, or do you think you felt like you were well prepared for the retirement through the retirement?
Well, I actually was going to go 2 years earlier, and then
Mm,
one of my ex-managers said, I think you need to look at your numbers. You need to stay at least 2 more years. So I looked at the numbers. I said, yeah, you're right. I'll stay 2 more years. So I waited until I turned 60 and then left. But it was I don't think I would have done anything differently. I think just having a plan, but also being able to be flexible. And I think the other thing I wanted to kind of say is like you have to like the first month, it's like every day I was eating my Saturday breakfast every day, which, my husband cooked breakfast on the weekends, and I say every day Saturday, so I'm going to eat my Saturday breakfast every day. And that wasn't a good thing, because I was gaining too much weight. But it was like I went through those mental gyrations of like, okay, I'm free, I can do whatever I want. And
mhm,
then I had to just give myself permission. It's like, okay, this is where I am now. Who is it and how do I want to be in this space right now? So I had to start thinking about, making adjustments in my mindset about I'm not going to work every day. What is it that I want to do? And so for like a month, I said, I'm not doing anything. Just a month. I'm not doing anything. And then after that, I started creating plans to do small things. But I did know that I never want to be a worker again.
mm.
So that is never going to
Yes,
change.
and that says it all.
Yeah.
What about Harvard? Would you have done anything differently in order to retire, or made a specific preparation as you were retiring?
Well, I don't think so. I think, I mean, I retired at 63, so rather early.
Mhm,
And, my decision at that time was that I'm not going to look back. I'm not, cut the cord and just move on. And I'm happy with that.
mhm,
And I think the university provided, really a lot of very good resources to
mhm,
get me to that point. I mean, the pre-retirement seminars and what have you. And the partnership with Fidelity was very helpful in
mhm.
that regard. So, the short answer is I don't think so. I mean, I'm really, really glad that, I retired early enough that I can do stuff.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, that's great. I just to let everyone know, I put some quick links over in the chat for you regarding preparing to retiring, and even how to set up a one-on-one counseling session with a counselor from RAS. So just to let you know that is there. But I'll go to my next question. And I'll ask Jane this question. Where have you turned for support during your challenging times? You mentioned things that happened that were unexpected, but where was your support crew coming from during those times?
Well, various things. Like I said, I'm really active at my church,
Mhm,
my friends, and then I actually retired when I was much older than the rest of you because the lab was my second career because I used to be a teacher. So my kids are older too, and so none of my kids live in the area, but they were a great support just because just the circumstances of the way my health kind of went downhill and whatever. So, but well, what else was I going to say? I think that was basically it, but also being well prepared. I mean, I'm kind of one of these people, kind of a type A personality that plans ahead. So I went to all those seminars like that Bianca is telling you, and I encourage you to do that. So mentally, I was really ready. I wasn't scared because I had my financial plan in order. I talked to the fidelity people, so everything was in place. And I think that gives you a lot of security so that if something happens, you still have all your basic ducks in a row, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And Camille, I'm not sure if you want to go ahead to the next question or.
Yeah, we'll move to the Q&A really quick. Just a
Yeah.
couple of kind of last to wrap up. So do anyone want to just say what questions do you recommend the audience ask themselves in preparing for retirement? Does anything pop up that you think people really need to ask themselves and think about?
I would say just, think about who do you want to be when you life after retirement, and because it's going to be totally different. Your social structure will change, your relationships may change, and um, think about some of the hobbies and things that you didn't have time for before. Do you want to delve into some of those? Or like, some people travel. It's like, what are some of the things that you really wanted to do while working but never had the time to do? And think about making a plan to explore some of those.
Great.
Well,
And then last question for all of you, I'd love if you could all answer this, is what is the best thing about being retired? So let's see. Rick, I'll start with you.
Oh,
Oh, man. Um, well, I think I said before, I spend a lot of time biking, and I like going to the library, and I like donuts. So biking to the library and stopping to get a donut, there's a good thing. Um, no, I think what I'm enjoying now, having gone through the transition, is just having time to catch up with people. And I said, have a long lunch, have a long walk, and just reconnecting with people and having the time to do that. And that includes going on walks in the evening with my wife, with school friends during the day if they're not working. But I think Delia said, not having the structure in your life allows you the freedom, the luxury, the incredible privilege of being able to do things that you want in a fairly spontaneous way.
Mhm.
Jane, you had your hand up. What were you going to say?
well, the first reaction I had is whenever anyone asks me that question, I say, I never set my alarm clock anymore. So that was, but Rick, I was going to say, I'm a reader too. So maybe I've seen you at the library because I have 3 library cards to 3 different libraries. But that was the other thing that I had a stack of books. I still have a stack of books, but you can sit and read and not go, oh gosh, I feel guilty. I should check my email for some work related thing. And just that kind of freedom. I mean, I'm still not one to sit around and not do anything, but I can choose what I want to do rather than, be on any kind of clock.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How about you, Howard?
well, in one word, freedom. It's freedom to choose how you use your time, and it's very liberating, but it's kind of scary. And I was kind of scared when I walked out the door, having all that freedom, because I don't remember having all that freedom since maybe I was in college or something like that.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
that would be my response.
And then Delia, what about you?
I guess I've always known I was an introvert. And so now I can be very solitary. I can be by myself and just do the things that are of interest to me and not feel guilty about it. If I'm watching YouTube videos on how to use watercolors all night long, so what?
Yeah.
Or if I'm reading a new book that came out at midnight and I want to finish it before the morning, so what?
Perfect.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'll turn over to Blanca to end, but thanks from me. A huge thanks to all four of you. This has been a wonderful event.
Thank you
Yes.
for doing.
Thank you, everybody, for attending today. I really appreciate it. We all appreciate your attendance here for our retirees and those who came as audience members, and really appreciate your attendance here. And thank you for Camille for really working hard in organizing this. Really hoo-ha for her. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I'll give you guys your time back. I know it's past 1 o'clock, so appreciate
Hi,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.